It's a beautiful day. It's Friday, April 17th, in the second week of Easter. Good to be with you on EWTN's Catholic Connection. Thank you so much for listening. And thanks for the kind words. Received several nice emails this week on our coverage of the discussion, shall we say, the back and forth between the Holy Father and the President of the United States, and the balance we try to take. And I want to encourage you, if you're still pondering that and praying about it, to please, if you didn't see The World Over last night with our very own Raymond Arroyo, please go online, and you can find it on YouTube, and just go to EWTN.com, and it'll direct you on how to watch. But as always, it was an excellent program. But in particular, the angle they took is pretty much the same what we did this week on Catholic Connection. And I thought it was very well done, very calm, very respectful, but looking at both sides, and the side of the Pope and the Church, to the concerns with what the President has with Iran. So it's a really good perspective. And of course, I always love Raymond's show, somewhat biased because I think he's amazing. Great interviewer. But I really think it'll help you as we go into more coverage, of course, which is still going on. So take a look at that. Coming up on the program today, speaking of EWTN, we're going to be chatting with our President Emeritus, our very own Doug Keck. He joins us at 15 minutes past the hour each Friday, giving you all kinds of details ahead of the game so you can jot it down and know what to watch and when. And then, of course, it's a Friday, so we have Fact Check Friday coming up. And I do want to take a look at the media and their selective coverage in a few stories, but also their coverage of this back and forth exchange between the Pope and the President. The media tend to cover religion when it suits them, when they can jump in and clutch their pearls, as I said earlier this week when I was chatting with Bill Donahue in the second hour of the program. I think that was on Wednesday. Today's Friday. They're all up in arms, and yet when it comes to the issue of abortion or the people joining the church, they scratch their heads as to why these things continue to happen. So don't think that the vast majority of the media are friends of the church. They're not. They shouldn't be friends of anybody in terms of their coverage. They can have their life outside of the news, and they can have their opinions. And if they do opinions in the news, it should be labeled as such. But they are still, according to their own guidelines, with such organizations as the Society of Professional Journalists, which is still active, are supposed to be seeking both sides of any issue, which rarely happens. So I'll give you some ideas in terms of my thoughts as a very old veteran of the media on how I think they've been covering this particular story and a few other stories in terms of their very selective coverage. And when they get their marching orders from the left to go after this person or that person, then they're all over it. They take those marching orders. And it's really interesting if you sit down and you watch all the mainstream networks and you look at the stories pertaining to a particular person or issue. I used to joke when I first wrote my book, Noise, that they're not sitting around printing out a statement and passing it around to the major outlets. But now I really wonder, because the wording is so similar, that it must be coming, and Vanessa Denhagarmo and I talk about this all the time, it must be coming from one central source, or maybe two or three central sources who are saying, okay, this is what we want you to say now about this particular person or situation. So anyway, we'll discuss in our Fact Check Friday. And then we're wrapping up with a great idea for summer. Yes, think summer, now that, thanks be to God, winter is behind. One of my favorite events in the summer is the Grand Getaway at the Mackinac Island retreat known as the Grand Hotel. John Hale, President of Corporate Travel, will be joining us, and you won't believe the lineup this year. It's phenomenal, including the one, the only, Bishop Robert Barron. Are you kidding me? No, I'm not. Imagine an entire several days with this incredible teacher of the faith, Bishop Robert Barron. Can't wait for that. So John will be joining us. And we'll let you know about the second hour coming up fairly quickly as we get closer, and it goes by so fast. All right, what are we looking at weather-wise? We're still getting clobbered here in the Midwest, and I was doing some research on what happened in Ann Arbor and looking at some of the videos. Wow, I mean, that part of the state, which is about an hour west of Detroit, was just clobbered, as well as western Michigan. There's still some flooding out in western Michigan and several other states in the Midwest. All right, so here's what we have according to the National Weather Service. A round of severe storms forecast across the southern plains, the Mississippi Valley, and the Great Lakes this afternoon and this evening. Now, the threat for flash flooding will also accompany the storms. A rainfall for the Great Lakes region could prolong the ongoing flooding. And when the rain is needed, the southern high plains critical fire weather concerns are actually happening through today. So in one area, they need the rain. In another area, such as Michigan and eastern Wisconsin, we say, basta, we've had enough. So we'll keep an eye on that for you as the stories develop. 5 minutes past the hour already on a Friday morning. We appreciate your listenership here on April 17th, the second week of Easter. Let's get started with the news on EWTN. After flying to the southwestern Cameroonian city of Douala today, the Holy Father presided at Mass, joined by around 600,000 faithful. In his homily, the Holy Father reflecting on the reading for today, the Gospel, the miracle of the multiplication of the loaves and the fishes for a great crowd, he said, just as in our Lord's time, people hunger for bread and wonder, where is God in the face of hunger? The Pope saying Jesus offered his response to this question by sharing what he and those around him had withal. A serious problem, he said, was solved by blessing the little food that was present and sharing it with all who were hungry. The multiplication of the loaves, he added, and the fish happened while sharing. That is the miracle. As long as bread is not stolen in strife, hoarded through rationing, or wasted by those who gorge themselves, there is food for everyone. Besides our material necessity, we also hunger for the bread of life in peace, freedom, and justice, and our every act of solidarity and forgiveness becomes a morsel of bread for humanity in need of care. The 11-day visit to Algeria, Cameroon, Angola, and Equatorial Guinea runs April 13th through the 23rd and marks the Holy Father's first apostolic journey to Africa. An investigation now underway after a bomb threat was made against one of the Pope's brothers. Police in Illinois confirming yesterday they had received a call about a reported bomb threat at the house of John Prevost the night before. According to New Lenox Police in Illinois, officers were called to a private residence about 6:29 p.m. after receiving a report of a bomb threat. Police setting up a perimeter around the home, asking nearby residents to leave as a precaution. After a thorough search of the property using dogs and investigators determining the threat was unsubstantiated and no explosives or hazardous materials were found. No injuries were reported and residents were allowed to return home after the scene was cleared. Now, earlier this week, and we've been discussing it here on Catholic Connection, President Trump saluted Louis Provost in a Truth Social post, criticizing the Holy Father's comments against the U.S. conflict in Iran and the need for peace. President Trump, meanwhile, says he has nothing against Pope Leo. He was asked about comments about the Pope over the war with Iran by reporters yesterday, insisting he doesn't have a fight with the Holy Father.
Well, I want him to preach the gospel. I'm all about the gospel, but I also know that you cannot let a certain country, which is a very mean-spirited country, have a nuclear weapon. If they did, they would use it, and I think they'd use it quickly, and they would kill many millions of people.
The president said Pope Leo has to understand Iran killed over 42,000 protesters, adding the country cannot have a nuclear weapon. Trump claiming the Pope said Iran can have a nuclear weapon. Trump went on to predict the Pope will be very happy with the results of the Iran conflict. President Trump says he wants to make a deal with Iran. Again, speaking to reporters yesterday outside the White House, he said Iran is willing to do things today they weren't willing to do 2 months ago, adding a deal could happen very quickly.
We're dealing very nicely with them. We've got to have no nuclear weapons. If we do, that's a big factor.
The president pointing to the U.S. naval blockade as one of the drivers pushing Iran to the bargaining table. Trump also mentioning a possible peace deal between Israel and Lebanon in the coming weeks. Earlier, he posted that Israel and Lebanon have agreed to a 10-day ceasefire. He said he hopes the leaders of the two countries will be at the White House to formalize an agreement soon. Matt Madison explains a Democrat-led effort regarding President Trump's war powers has failed.
The War Powers resolution failed by a 214 to 213 vote Thursday. A similar measure recently failed in the Senate 52 to 47, largely along party lines. Democrats and some Republicans say they're now eyeing the 60-day mark for the Iran war, which comes at the end of April. The War Powers resolution of 1973 requires presidents to get congressional approval for military action that goes beyond 60 days. I'm Matt Mattinson.
And the president will be in Phoenix today, touting his economic agenda and energizing Republicans before the midterms. Trump will speak along with Erica Kirk at Turning Point USA, a rally titled Build the Red Wall. Mark Mayfield explains a new poll conducted for the Miami Herald shows strong support among South Florida Cubans and Cuban Americans for U.S. military action in Cuba.
The survey found nearly 8 out of 10 respondents favor an intervention aimed at regime change, humanitarian relief, or both, while strongly opposing negotiations that leave the communist government in power. The poll comes as reports say the Pentagon is quietly ramping up preparations for possible military operations in Cuba if President Trump orders an intervention. The White House has increased pressure on Havana in recent months, including limiting oil shipments to the island nation amid rising tensions across the region. I'm Mark Mayfield.
And the commencement speaker has been cut from the Utah Valley University over her comments about Charlie Kirk. The conservative activist was shot to death during a Turning Point USA event on campus last September. Sharon McMahon had been tapped to speak and receive an honorary degree at UVU's commencement ceremony on April 29th. That has now been canceled, however, after anger from Republicans in the state. Last year, she posted a comment where she condemned Kirk's murder, but she also said that a public assassination does not erase the harm many experienced from his words. Jim Roop tells us President Trump has selected a new nominee for the CDC director.
The president has tapped Dr. Erica Schwartz to run the agency pending Senate confirmation. Schwartz previously served as Deputy Surgeon General in Trump's first administration and served as a Rear Admiral in the Coast Guard. She also holds a medical degree from Brown University and a law degree from the University of Maryland. Trump took to Truth Social and said she's incredibly talented, adding she's a star. The CDC has been without a permanent director since last August. I'm Jim Roop.
EWTN News reporting this morning, young men in the U.S. are passing young women in regard to the importance of religion in their lives. The findings from the 2024-25 Gallup data revealed that 42% of young men ages 18 to 29 said religion is very important to them, up 14 percentage points since 2022 and 23. That jump pushes them above the 29% of young women who reported the same. Gallup's information comes from more than 4,000 interviews with U.S. adults, including 295 men under 30 and 145 women under 30. The survey had a margin of error of between plus or minus 7 and 10 percentage points, also using information from separate reports. And Gallup finding that young women are significantly the least likely age group of women to report religion is very important to them, compared with 47% of women from ages 30 to 49 and 53% of women ages 50 to 64. And Wendy Swanson tells us local law enforcement in Arizona in Nancy Guthrie's area are increasing their patrols.
The Pima County Sheriff's Office says that's due to residents' complaints of social media influencers on private property. Reports say Sheriff Chris Nanos attended a neighborhood watch meeting to discuss the move. The mother of Today's Show host Savannah Guthrie has been missing for over 2 months and is believed to have been abducted. No arrests have been made. In Arizona, I'm Wendy Swanson.
And the Artemis crew says it's bonded forever after its record-breaking mission around the moon. Mission Commander Reed Wiseman speaking at the news conference yesterday, joined by his 3 crewmates.
We launched as friends, and we came back as best friends.
Specialist Christina Cook said she wasn't aware of how much attention the mission was getting back on Earth, but her husband later told her the crew has made such a difference. Cook said that brought tears to her eyes, and making a difference was all the crew ever wanted. It is a Friday morning. Appreciate your listenership here at EWTN. It's April 17th, and we'll be right back with the Inside Word. And Doug Keck joins us as always. Stay tuned. It's a Friday, 16 minutes past the hour, and that means the Inside Word with our good friend Doug Keck, our President Emeritus. How goes the battle, my friend? What's going on?
Oh, I think the battle rages royally, as they say. You can't... from hour to hour, you get different things. Obviously, of course, with EWTN, one of our great commitments is to cover the Pope. And, of course, the Pope has been outside of discussions that have happened related to the Pope and our president. But the Pope is about his business in Africa and has been in Cameroon today. And there's some events happening there. And then he's going to be there tomorrow as well. And then he goes on to Angola on Sunday. He'll be there on Monday. And then he ends up moving on to Equatorial Guinea and running things through Thursday. And there's masses and other events. And the best thing to do is go to EWTN.com and check out, because it's such an intense schedule really would be better for you to check it out directly that way. But and check out, of course, EWTN on the air right now, because our coverage is happening throughout. Some of the events are carried live, some of them be on tape delay, but they will be available. And you can always check out EWTN Plus as well, that platform, and whatever's made available that we can make available on our YouTube channel. Of course, we have our regular programming, Savoring Our Faith, Catholics Come Home, which is a program that's going to be airing as well on the 19th, and that's going to be on Sunday. And it's going to be talking with something that we've seen a lot of, which is young people coming into the church. Something that was kind of talked about, I know, in the news and other things recently. Certainly, I know many of us have talked about it on our shows, especially young men being attracted to the church, which you think is kind of odd in a sense because of the, with so many issues going on. You're surprised that many people are really attracted, but it's the power of the Holy Spirit.
Right. Well, it's interesting to follow. I'm going to be talking about this in my Fact Check Friday segment coming up, how the media are all up in arms because so many people are joining the church, and they're saying they're joining for all the wrong reasons, and how can this be happening? They just cannot accept that there are people on planet Earth, God's green earth, that like the commitment the church has to truth, like the commitment the church has to family, and the consistency of the teaching over the years, but they're scratching their heads over this.
Well, it's always been the case that, secularism always thinks it'll take over these kinds of things. Even in countries with Islam, there was a lot of the idea of Afghanistan and these other places. If we just bring in sex, drugs, and rock and roll, they won't really worry about their radical religion anymore, and that doesn't work that way, or their religion, period, because whatever concerns we might have about radical Islam, for the people who practice that religion, it's important to them, and we saw that in the Soviet Union, where the communists thought they stamped out the faith, and it was still there, and it comes back because at the end of the day, it's the truth, and the truth is always going to win out, and it's always going to be the communists, the secularists, the fascists, whatever you want to call them, who want to control things in their own way, who want to use that power to destroy that, because it's a competition, because they ultimately want you to worship the state.
Absolutely. And so in terms of the coverage, and we're looking at all of these different things. You mentioned the coverage of the Holy Father, but I think the other thing that we do, and I was talking about this at the top of the hour, Doug, and you were involved in this for many years in terms of the development of programming, for example, The World Over with Raymond Arroyo. I watch it every week, but I thought the show last night was particularly helpful for me because I really trust him and the sources he has on regarding the developments with the Holy Father and President Trump. And I think it's really important for us not to be afraid to discuss those issues, respectfully, of course, but to discuss them and look, okay, what does the church say about this? Is this a just war? What can we say about this as faithful Catholics?
Well, I think that's very, very true. And I think in my mind, it's kind of like, of course, the Holy Father should speak out for peace. Of course, there are things that, as the Pope, are your number one priorities, the safety of people, the caring of the poor. That it's a natural thing for that to be the position the Church takes in almost every situation. That being said, with separation of church and state in the sense of the fact that there are different priorities and prudential judgments, there are other decisions that get made that you have to say, well, yes, I understand those things, but from a political point of view or from a safety point of view, there was a belief system that there was an imminent danger that was not only going to face the United States, but actually be even much more of a threat to Europe and the local neighbors in that part of the world. So if you believe that, then you could say that this is a defensive action to keep a radical neighbor from acquiring a bomb that he was going to be very happy to either use or at least use as leverage to control other things that would be detrimental to people living in the world, and that this can make things a better place or a safer place. We hope that that's true. That being said, again, we always want the Holy Father to be speaking out for those people who need a voice. Some people would say that sometimes they're disappointed at times, whether it's in Africa or even if you believe the numbers, unclear in the number of people who were maybe slaughtered in the last 2 months who are protesting the regime there, that there didn't seem to be a lot of voices being raised. And, We don't know whether that's a decision being made because it would make things worse if the Pope spoke out, like sometimes was
during
claimed
World
during World War
Yeah.
II.
Mm-hmm.
The same idea. If he said something, it would just make it worse for those people. But sometimes it can give the impression that these other things are either ignored or are okay, and that it's only sort of when some in the United States does something that somebody's willing to say something.
How long early, I should say early, because you're within the network for years, did Mother have this vision of being able to offer not only obviously 24/7 Catholic media, Orthodox Catholic media, but the idea of having news outlets? I know she brought Raymond on very early, because thinking about this and watching the world over last night and all the programs you just mentioned, the coverage that we're giving obviously to the Pope and the extensive outlets that we have now, and thinking what would we be doing if we only had, please God, don't make it happen, CBS, NBC, and ABC to watch and find out what's going on in the world, especially in the church.
Right, absolutely, and even to some degree, depending on your perspective, the change in Twitter and X, and at least having
social media,
a major outlet with that at least seems to be able to put out some different points of view rather than just kind of one particular theme. Yeah, I mean, I think Mother's concern was exactly that. She wanted to make sure there was a place people could go and get the truth. And it's one of the reasons why, many times people would say in the past, well, let's do a debate. We'll debate this, we'll debate these things, and we'll get big audiences because it'll be a debate. And Mother would used to say, listen, the devil has his other networks. Everybody hears that stuff already. We don't need to be debating anything. We just need to be presenting the truth of the Catholic Church as given to us by our Lord. That's our job. Mm-hmm. And then as Catholics, we're to be empowered, emboldened by that, so we can go out into the marketplace and stand up against these other perspectives.
But it's just so crucial, because when you have someone like Robert Royal and a Father Murray on, of course those experts, because they're so orthodox. But what I thought was very well done last night was, okay, the Pope can say this, but the President has his reasons, looking at both sides of the issue.
Right, absolutely, and I think just like the Holy Father doesn't need to be criticized because he's speaking on something that people might see as political. The fact that a politician or a president responds, I think that's new. People are used to the idea that most politicians would just say, oh, well, because they're politicians. But Donald Trump, for the good or the bad of him, isn't really a politician. I think he sees, listen, I'm going to be president for 2 more years, and that's it. I'm not looking to be reelected. I'm not looking to cull favor with people. I'm looking to do what I think we need to do to make the world as safe as I can make it while I still have the ability to do it. Now, he might be totally misguided, but I think that's what's driving him.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm just appreciative that we have these different outlets and so many people on which we can rely. For example, Father Mitch did a great job on our Cultural Connections yesterday, talking about exactly what Father Murray and Robert Royal talked about last night. But again, looking back over the history of the network, the developments that we've seen in all these outlets, I think, are so helpful for people. I mean, really, and for me as a news person, too, to have these different sources on which I can rely. And Doug, you were a big part of that, so we really appreciate it. Doug Keck, our President Emeritus, joining us every single Friday for the Inside Word. Have a great weekend, Doug. We'll be right back.
Thanks a lot.
Welcome back, Catholic Connection, on a Friday morning. It's April 17th, 2026. Great to be with you. So much to come this morning. Also, don't want to miss the interview following our Fact Check Friday. And we have a special offer, a little surprise that we're going to be offering our EWTN Catholic Connection listeners. John Hale, the president of Corporate Travel, is going to be joining us about the Grand Getaway. And it's a very big deal. It's always a very nice time. And we do it starting on Sunday and then for 2 days during the week, because that way you have a less of a price tag, because on the weekends at the Grand Hotel, as you can imagine, it's extremely expensive. And so they get a nice break on the days that they do it. But anyway, talking about what we were discussing with Doug Keck in terms of bringing truth and balance, I think one of the greatest religious leaders we have in our country this day is Bishop Robert Barron. And so he's going to be there, and he has a lot to say about the media and ethics and, of course, government. He's going to be emphasizing our 250th birthday and talking about religious freedom and history that weekend, but a little bit more on that later. Just wanted to make sure you were aware if you're just tuning in, so you stay tuned and learn more about this event in August, the Grand Getaway. Okay, as I mentioned at the top of the hour, I wanted to talk a little bit about the way the media have been covering the situation with the Pope and the President. What I always find fascinating is how the media all of a sudden become religious when they think it'll suit the leftist agenda. And they love to pit, especially Catholic religious people, and someone as high up, the Vicar of Christ, the Pope, against the President, and just make, the particular people that they don't like look bad. And so what they're doing is really manipulating particular stories and playing one against the other. That's why it's so important, as Doug mentioned in our previous segment, to make sure that the sources which you're following are doing this, are covering these stories in a balanced way. That's why I was talking about Raymond's show last night, The World Over. He does an excellent job every single week of balancing the issues and looking at both sides of the story while maintaining respect for the Vicar of Christ and for the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. That's what you should be looking for in coverage. Now, the media, of course, are not going to be spouting Catholic teaching, nor should they be, because that's not their role. They're not a Catholic entity. But they should at least be spouting balance and be consistent with their coverage. All of a sudden, they're all over the Catholic Church. They're all over religion. They're all over, again, clutching their pearls, upset at what the president said about the Pope. And we discussed that this week. It was extremely disrespectful and inappropriate what he said originally, okay? But the difference is, as Doug pointed out, and as we've pointed out all week on this show, there are legitimacies in their differences in the approaches that the Pope is taking and the approach that the administration is taking. But it's highly hypocritical of the media to sit there and, ignore the discrimination against Christians in this country, including the Department of Justice report that was just released. How much coverage did that receive? It was a big story, of course, for us on EWTN News about pro-lifers who were basically followed and investigated for years. And you have the Hope family, right? There was a big story, and thanks be to God, he won a lawsuit. He was vindicated and won a lawsuit on top of it. But look at what that man and his family went through. Where was the coverage on that? Why weren't they just as appalled and upset? Because it's selective coverage. The issues with which they agree, and they don't agree with the war at all, so they're going to jump on the fact as if it's a surprise, a newsflash, that any pope, this pope or others, is going to be against a war. But anything that supports their agenda, they use it to their favor. What do they have to say? Think about this. The Pope has made plenty of statements since his election almost a year ago now, in May last year, 25, about abortion, the evils of abortion, about the breakdown of the family, about the importance of the nuclear family. Did you see any headlines about that? Did you see them taking this up as a matter of discussion, which really would have been a very, very good thing to do, very timely? And they don't have to take that up from a religious perspective. They can bring in experts that, even if they're not Catholic, back up with the church's teaching in terms of what happens when the family breaks down. There's all kinds of research on that, most of it actually from secular entities. So again, this is really important when you see the media getting all up in arms over a particular religious issue. Look at the issue. What is it? And how do the media normally cover these issues? Because unfortunately, the media now, in terms of much of the mainstream media, not every single outlet, we do have some other outlets out there that have come in the last few years, which are doing a much better job. But for the most part, those who have the largest platforms are still the ones who see themselves as activists and advocates. And there used to be a line between editorial, op-eds. There used to be a line with understanding the difference between a talk show host and a news person, between a talk show and a newscast. They have blurred the line so much that even in their news coverage, for example, when they're doing a newscast in between their opinion shows, You can't tell the difference. And it's so hypocritical because they still claim that they have all these different principles. For example, I'm a graduate of what used to be a very prestigious journalism think tank. Every year, news directors, editors are able to send, it might be operating a little bit differently now because I went a long time ago. I went shortly after actually this whole program started. But what was considered a very, as I said, sophisticated journalism think tank. My news director, one of my news directors, when I started in TV News, sent me to the Poynter Institute for Media Studies. They had a week-long program, and they brought in TV anchors and TV reporters from around the country to examine news coverage, to discuss issues of coverage, and it was great. We talked about balance. We talked about attribution. We talked about the importance of not relying on anonymous sources. But if you go to their website today, they have been drinking the Kool-Aid, and they take a leftist position on practically everything. While at the same time, if you go to their guidelines, their ethical guidelines, or if you go, again, and I've read this on the air many times, to the Society of Professional Journalists, of which I was a member for many years, they all talk about, again, balance, seeking out both sides of the story, rarely, if ever, using anonymous sources, claiming, and this is what I learned in J school a long time ago, decades ago, anonymous sources are only used in extreme cases. For example, let's say there's a situation where you're unable to break through and there's someone who has some key information, but that person's life or their safety may be in danger if they reveal the information. Rarely are we supposed to be using anonymous sources because then it gets just too easy to play loosey-goosey with the facts. Anybody can say the source is anonymous, and that's what we've seen happening more and more over the years. And so it's very interesting. And then you have the case of this congressman who resigned, Swalwell from California. He was the darling of the media, doing all these talk shows, all the time, coming out speaking for the left. And then when the situation started to break, the news started to break about his scandals, it's like, okay, here are your marching orders. And then almost, if you just like point, okay, let's round up the usual suspects. Different hosts on different shows, both news and talk, are saying, oh, yes, I noticed something very off as a woman and being in contact with this congressman. Things just didn't seem right. All of a sudden, you notice this? Well, why didn't you speak out before if you're so concerned about Me Too? Again, it's selective interest. It's selective coverage. Don't think that the majority of the media are in our corner and want to fairly cover the Catholic Church. Not happening, at least not yet. Minutes past the hour. Happy Friday, and it's April 17th, the second week of Easter. Great to be with you. And in my 2 cent segment coming up, I'm going to be talking about the power of reflection and the importance of taking time away based on some beautiful comments from the astronauts in their press conference yesterday, which were really, really cool. And this is what the Grand Getaway offers us. Every summer, a chance to get away to a beautiful island in the middle of the Great Lakes, and it's so pretty. And we think of August, and we know that in many parts of the country, it's so steamy and humid and very uncomfortable. We actually have a lot of people from the deep south, from Texas and Alabama, who come because they love the Michigan summers because they're warm, but they're cool. And so it's a great opportunity to enjoy nice weather, to walk around the island, have some scenery, but also have some beautiful talks by amazing speakers. And we've been doing this for many years. Every year it sells out, and we have a special deal for you this morning. But first, I want to bring on my dear friend, John Hale, President of Corporate Travel, to talk about this event. John, happy Friday to you, my friend.
Oh, it is a happy Friday because we're talking about Mackinac on this very, very foggy Michigan day, Teresa. It seems fitting that we can put ourselves up there in Mackinac Island with the bright colors and the beautiful weather that we'll see in August.
Let's talk about how this all came about, the Grand Getaway.
You know, it started really as a family getaway, and we produce an event every year for school kids, middle school age, in the spring. And it's an opportunity for them to have some academic learning, social learning, because you still have to dress for dinner, and really it's a great opportunity for younger people to have a really nice experience. And so we have schools from across the Midwest who come up, and then the owners of the hotel would say, well, do you want to bring up family or a few people up later in the summer? And we started doing that, and we would bring a priest, and we would have the opportunity to have Mass, and then that kind of grew and expanded, and Teresa, you and Deacon Dom have joined us for many, many years, and we just said, this is a beautiful place for a retreat. It's a beautiful island, and it's such an kind of an all-inclusive price because it includes these unbelievable breakfasts and of course, the very traditional 5-course dinner and the entertainment with the band and then all of our speakers. And the hotel works closely with us to make this like a one package so that we have the hotel, the music, the dining, the event space, and everything all together. And always have a few surprises. And this year is celebrating America's 250th anniversary.
Wow. You can go to my website, teresatomio.com, and go to the events section and scroll down. You'll see a link to the Grand Hotel Getaway, which is coming up in early August. And we have a special offer that we are bringing to you this morning. And I just heard about this. So I want to share it with you quickly. Right now, we have a $100 discount through April 30th. So through the end of the month, right, for the Grand Getaway. But if the first 10 room bookings who call the CTS office, Corporate Travel Service office, at 866-468-1420 and mention Teresa Grand Hotel, that's your discount code, Teresa Grand Hotel, they will receive a $200 per person discount. That's double what is currently offered. Anyway, we're talking about the Grand Hotel, and this is in northern Lower Michigan on Mackinac Island. Now, if you're not familiar with it, I would just do yourself a favor and Google Mackinac Island. And it is a very peaceful, serene place. There are no cars allowed. It's a very popular vacation spot, especially with folks from Chicago, Illinois, Western Michigan, of course, Detroit, the entire state. Many people, though, come for just the day, and they stay for a few hours. They go and get their fudge. It's famous for their fudge. And they get back on the ferry, and they go back to northern Lower Michigan, to Mackinac City, and spend time there, and then maybe go to the West Coast, which is known as the Gold Coast, which is beautiful. Okay, so we were talking about the discount. Let's go over the discount again if we can.
Yeah, so a $200 discount if you call the office, the first 10 rooms, and mention Teresa Tomio Grand Getaway. And we're offering on this cloudy Michigan day, this foggy Michigan day, the opportunity to come up to Grand Hotel with us August 9 to 11 with Rachel Bullman, Monsignor Shea, Bishop Barron, you and Deacon Dom, and Father Frankie from Hale and from our Good News Cruise and Conference.
So, wow, Father Frankie's coming this year. Wow, I didn't know that. Why didn't I know that? That must be new. Is that something new on the itinerary?
It is new. Yes, Father Frankie is joining us. So it's going to be a great, as you said, a lot of people from the South, Arizona, Texas, Florida, like to come up and join us, and they add a day or two on either end and kind of get out of the heat in the summer. And just so many people love Mackinac Island because it's one of those, once-in-a-lifetime experiences, and so beautiful in the summer. And again, an opportunity to get a little break from the heat in the South.
And the phone number, John, to call is 866-468-1420 and mention this interview, Teresa Grand Hotel, to get a $200 discount. So Bishop Barron's going to be concentrating on our anniversary in the country, right? And religious freedom and the history of the U.S., religious history in the U.S., correct?
Exactly, yes. And that's, they're going to be our theme. It's one way that we can celebrate, if you remember in 1976, Teresa, that was such a, imprinted in my memory that the whole country celebrating. Mm-hmm. And I hope that this year we can pull together, even though it's been a tough year, and really just focus and have a gratitude for all that God has done for us individually and as family and as nation and as faithful Catholics, all of His goodness. And to come together with that theme, it seems is both important and appropriate. So it will be a very special place. And there's a lot of American history, of course, on Mackinac Island, for going back to American Revolution. And so it's a fitting place to celebrate the 250th anniversary, and especially such a uniquely family and historic hotel like Grand Hotel, built in 1887. And it's just very family friendly, and also a place for friends to gather, for couples to have a romantic getaway. It's a very special place.
And we have Mass daily, correct?
We do, yes. We'll have Mass daily, and then speakers throughout the time. Some ability to enjoy the pool and the island itself. Of course, there are no cars on the island, so you get around by bike, by foot, or by horse and carriage. And so it's just the most unique setting and place. There are lawn games, and again, it's a very all-inclusive experience. So there's just so many things that you can do while you're there. And one of the best things is to sit on the world's largest porch and read a book and pray and meditate, especially in the morning as the sun's coming up over the Straits of Mackinac. There's just, way up high on the hill overlooking the beautiful island and the deep blue water, that deep blue sky, which I long for today in cloudy Michigan. It's really, it's incredible.
Do you find that when people are going, as we call it in Michigan up north, that they extend their trip after going to the Grand Hotel, maybe staying on the island longer, or maybe going down to the northwest Gold Coast, as we call it, with Petoskey and Charlevoix, or maybe going up to the Upper Peninsula?
A lot of us do. I mean, there are many of us here in Michigan and the Midwest who have friends, in that sort of Gaylord North corridor. And the people who are coming from the south or from further away often will spend a few days from Traverse City, Harbor Springs, Petoskey, Charlevoix. They have the Sleeping Bear Dunes. There's so many beautiful sights along that coast, and it's a great. Michigan is so underrated, I think.
Right.
I mean, it's most fresh water in the world, and particularly as you get into August, it's just absolutely beautiful. I mean, it's one of the most beautiful areas of the country, and people don't really know or talk about it. I mean, more and more, I think that I hear more and more people who visit or have a place or visit that Gold Coast area of Michigan, but a lot of folks haven't been, and it is not a place to skip. I think it should be on everybody's list to visit.
Well, the water is just so incredible. There's something very different about the Great Lakes. And when you're standing along the west coast of Michigan looking at Lake Michigan, or the east coast looking at Lake Huron, or in northern lower Michigan, the Straits of Mackinac, there's a different color. And there's, as you said, it's so deep because the water there is very deep. The other point, too, John, is that Mackinac Island and Mackinac City, not very far from Cross in the Woods, which is the largest outdoor crucifix, I think, in the world. And they have a Catholic church there and a museum. And that's a great place for people to stop on the way up or down from Mackinac, right?
It is, yeah, and a lot of our group, of course, do visit Cross in the Wood. It's only about 20 minutes, less than a half hour from Mackinac City, where you take the ferry and the boat ride across. Of course, the package includes the ferry crossing and, all of our team there to help make it smooth and easy. But once you're in Mackinac City, you have to take a ferry across to the island, and that's one of the best parts of the whole trip.
That's part of the fun,
20,
right?
Oh, it is, that 20 minutes across, and just that beautiful blue, deep water, as you said. And that time of year, there's just very little humidity, so all the colors are just more vibrant. And I love, you kind of make the round, and you see the Grand Hotel perched up halfway up the hill on the island, and you just sort of like breathe and can relax and open your mind, and most importantly, open your heart to the great talks we'll hear. Of course, most importantly, the sacraments, which every event we do is designed to bring us back to the sacraments, back to confession and the Eucharist, which, as you said, we have each day. And it really is the beauty. I mean, you talk often about how media uses emotion. I mean, in social media, they use anger, they use, all kinds of outrage and fear to drive us back and to, I think, ultimately damage and hurt us. And through these events, we really try to create an atmosphere of gratitude, of joy, of laughter, to have that emotion open our hearts to the message that God wants to speak to each of us. And then I think that the gift of the Eucharist, the gift of the sacraments, can penetrate more deeply into our soul. And then we kind of be those God bearers as we leave the island and go back refreshed, renewed, and ready to be better disciples.
Yeah. And it's so much fun. I love doing the live broadcast there with the group. It's really a great way to kind of get the inside look at how we do a radio show. It's a lot of fun, and I know the guests appreciate it as well. So this is coming up. What are the dates again, John, for our listeners?
August 9 to 11 this summer. And again, you can append a nice visit to Northern Michigan before or after. And if you call our office at 866-468-1420, we're offering a $200 per person discount if you mention Teresa Tomeo Grand Getaway.
And it's, $200 a person, because right now there's $100 through April 30th, but the special code is kicking in this morning, and it's Teresa Grand Hotel or Teresa Tomeo Grand Hotel, Teresa Tomeo Catholic Connection, whatever, but $200 per person, which is great and will go a long way. I can't wait, John. I love our home state, especially in the summertime. It's so beautiful, northern lower Michigan, and you could be Michigander for a few days and just know what it feels like to live in a state that is surrounded by water. The Great Lakes are just an incredible place to be. John, thanks so much. And again, I want to remind you, you can also go for more information, ctscentral.net, but my website, teresatomeo.com. Scroll down, Bishop Barron, Father Frankie Cicero, Monsignor Shea. Oh my goodness, a live broadcast of Catholic Connection, all at the amazing Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island. We'll be right back. Hope you're having a great day. It is a Friday, April 17th, 2026. And again, if you want information on any events coming up, you can just go to my website, teresatomeo.com. Also, forgot to mention, asking for your prayers after the show. I am heading out to Colorado, Windsor, Colorado, which I understand is about 45 minutes from Denver, or in that area. Beautiful church, Our Lady of the Valley. They have a wonderful women's conference each year, and I'm their keynote speaker doing 3 talks. I'm really looking forward to it. So I'll be there all day tomorrow, and just pray that all goes well, and really appreciate that, and I'll tell you all about it on Monday morning. So coming up, we have 2 cents, and I want to look at this whole idea of reflection. John Hale was talking about that in terms of what you can experience at our Grand Hotel Getaway and how important reflection is. There's a great quote from the press conference yesterday with the astronauts commenting on what they saw when they were, on the dark side of the moon and beyond. And it's very inspirational, even though the astronaut that makes the main statement says he's not even religious, but he talks about the fact, and this is the point on which I want to expand. He talks about the fact that they have not had time to decompress in terms of what they actually experienced and witnessed with their eyes, and with their hearts. And this ties into some advice that I always give when you're going to the motherland, to Italy. 1 tour a day. That's it. There's actually a syndrome from which you can suffer if you take in too much information and too much beauty at one time. We'll talk about that and the importance of reflection. More Catholic Connection coming your way on a Friday morning. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
Second hour of Catholic Connection on EWTN Radio Extra. Thanks for tuning in. It is Friday, April 17th. Great to be with you. Hope all is going well. We have a wonderful show lined up for you this morning. Looking forward to chatting with Michael New, Senior Associate Scholar for the Charlotte Lozier Institute. He'll be talking to us about Planned Parenthood's 2025 report, an increase of abortions and a decrease in health care screening. I'm shocked, I tell you, shocked. Not really. Anyway, we'll also, since we have the expert on with us, talk to him about this report from the Department of Justice regarding the attacks in terms of political attacks on pro-lifers and how this shows that there was a systematic effort to go after people of faith and people who support life. We'll talk about that with, again, Michael New, Senior Associate Scholar for the Charlotte Lozier Institute. So, 2 cents, I want to talk about reflection. I don't know if you caught any of the press conference yesterday with the astronauts. But my friend Marcy from Teresa Tomeo Communications sent me the link, and I watched it, and it was just beautiful. And you know that Victor Glover, I think is his name, is a Christian, very outspoken Christian. And he made a comment, but what I thought was interesting, he made several comments, but the first comment's about the importance of reflection and trying to kind of like sit back and say, what in the world just happened here? What did we just do? And what did we just see? The beauty, the creativity of the universe. They're saying on this panel of these very, very intelligent people with very big brains, I got to decompress. And they weren't talking about the physical tests and whatnot that they have to go through after being in space for so long. They were talking about the need to emotionally really kind of say, okay, what did we just see here? How is this possible? And so I want to pick up on that. We have that clip. Richard's going to play it for us in 2 cents. Because it reminds me of how important, and this is why we offer so many different opportunities. And Deacon Dom and I have noticed over the years, and the many trips that we do, including the Grand Hotel Getaway, which we mentioned in the first hour with John Hale from Corporate Travel, and also the pilgrimages we do every year, the impact that getting away, having downtime to reflect after experiencing, for example, something so powerful as going to St. Peter's, or, you know, being away in a place like Mackinac, which is beautiful in terms of God's creation. How do we take time to really appreciate what we've just seen, what we've just experienced? How does this bring us closer to God? Oftentimes, we may just check something off on our bucket list and say, oh, we saw that, we're good to go. No. I'll share some stories and also some ideas on how you can make the most of reflection by not doing too much at one time. You know, there's even a syndrome. There's actually a real psychological syndrome that when you expose yourself to too much, especially too much beauty at one time, that your mind shuts down because you can't comprehend it. We will discuss in 2 cents. So that is a show for today. Michael New will be with us, and in 2 cents we're going to talk about the importance of slowing down and the importance of reflection. All right, let's take a look at the weather and see what's happening in terms of the importance of being safe. We have a round of severe storms, according to the National Weather Service, across the areas of the Southern Plains, the Mississippi Valley, and the Great Lakes this afternoon and this evening. The threat for flash flooding will also accompany these storms, and the rainfall for the Great Lakes region could prolong the ongoing flooding. Now, where the rain is needed, the Southern High Plains, critical fire weather concerns remain through today. So they need rain in the Southern High Plains. We don't need any more rain in the Midwest, so hopefully that will switch. That's a look at the forecast on your Friday morning. Wishing you a blessed and beautiful weekend, but stay tuned as we begin the news here on EWTN Radio Extra. Well, after flying to the southwestern Cameroonian city of Douala yesterday, the Holy Father presided at a mass joined by around 600,000, yes, you heard correctly, 600,000 faithful. In his homily, the Holy Father, reflecting on the Lord's miracle, the multiplication of the loaves and the fishes for a great crowd, he said, just as in our Lord's time, people hunger for bread and wonder, where is God in the face of hunger? Pope Leo adding, Jesus offered his response to this question by sharing what he and those around him had with them. A serious problem was solved by the blessing of the little food that was present and sharing it with all who are hungry. As long as bread is not stolen and strife hoarded through rationing or wasted by those who gorge themselves, there is food for everyone. Besides our material necessity, we also hunger for the bread of life and peace, freedom and justice, and our very act of solidarity and forgiveness becomes a morsel of bread for humanity in need of care. The 11-day visit to Algeria, Cameroon, Angola, and Equatorial Guinea will run through April 23rd, marking the Holy Father's first apostolic journey to Africa. An investigation now underway after a bomb threat was made against one of the Holy Father's brothers. Police in Illinois confirming they had received a call about a reported bomb threat at the house of John Prevost the night before. According to New Lenox Police, officers were called to a private residence on Sojourn Road about 6:30 local time after receiving a report of a bomb threat. Police setting up a perimeter around the home, asking residents to leave as a precaution. After a thorough search of the property using police canines, investigators determining the threat was unsubstantiated. No explosives or hazardous materials were discovered, and no injuries were reported. Residents were then allowed to return home. Earlier this week, President Trump saluted Louis Prevost in a Truth Social post, criticizing the Holy Father's comments against the U.S. conflict in Iran and the need for peace. President Trump, meanwhile, says he has nothing against Pope Leo. He was asked about comments about the Pope over the war with Iran by reporters yesterday, insisting he doesn't have a fight with the Catholic Church leader.
Well, I want him to preach the gospel. I'm all about the gospel. But I also know that you cannot let a certain country, which is a very mean-spirited country, have a nuclear weapon. If they did, they would use it, and I think they'd use it quickly, and they would kill many millions of people.
The president said the Pope has to understand Iran killed over 42,000 protesters, adding it cannot have a nuclear weapon. Trump claimed the Holy Father said Iran can have a nuclear weapon. Trump went on to predict the Pope will be very happy with the results of the Iran conflict. Meanwhile, the president says Iran apparently now wants to make a deal. Again, speaking to reporters yesterday outside the White House, the president saying Iran is willing to do things today they weren't willing to do 2 months ago, adding a deal he says could happen fairly quickly.
We're dealing very nicely with them. We've got to have no nuclear weapons. If we do, that's a big factor.
Trump pointing to the U.S. naval blockade as one of the drivers pushing Iran to the table. Trump also mentioning as possible peace deal between Israel and Lebanon in the coming weeks. Earlier today, posting that Israel and Lebanon agreeing to a 10-day ceasefire. He said he hopes the leaders of the two countries will be at the White House to formalize an agreement soon. Matt Madison says a Democratic-led effort regarding the president's war powers has failed.
The War Powers resolution failed by a 214 to 213 vote Thursday. A similar measure recently failed in the Senate 52 to 47, largely along party lines. Democrats and some Republicans say they're now eyeing the 60-day mark for the Iran war, which comes at the end of April. The War Powers resolution of 1973 requires presidents to get congressional approval for military action that goes beyond 60 days. I'm Matt Mattinson.
President Trump will be in Phoenix today to tout his economic agenda and energize Republicans before the midterm elections. He will speak along with Erica Kirk at a Turning Point USA rally entitled Build the Red Wall. And the commencement speaker has been cut from Utah Valley University over her comments about Charlie Kirk. The conservative leader was shot to death during a Turning Point USA event on campus last September. Sharon McMahon has been tapped to speak and receive an honorary degree at the university's commencement ceremony on April 29th. Now, that's been canceled after anger from Republicans in Utah. McMahon last year posted a comment where she condemned Kirk's murder, but she also said that a public assassination does not erase the harm many experienced from Kirk's words. A new poll conducted, as Mark Mayfield tells us, for the Miami Herald shows strong support among South Florida Cubans and Cuban Americans for U.S. military action in Cuba.
The survey found nearly 8 out of 10 respondents favor an intervention aimed at regime change, humanitarian relief, or both, while strongly opposing negotiations that leave the communist government in power. The poll comes as reports say the Pentagon is quietly ramping up preparations for possible military operations in Cuba if President Trump orders an intervention. The White House has increased pressure on Havana in recent months, including limiting oil shipments to the island nation amid rising tensions across the region. I'm Mark Mayfield.
Young men in the U.S., as EWTN News reports, surpassing young women in regard to the importance of religion in their lives. EWTN News says findings from 2024 and 25 Gallup information revealing that 42% of young men ages 18 to 29 say religion is very important to them, and that's up 14 percentage points since 2022 and 23. The jump pushes them above the 29% of young women who reported the same. Gallup's information comes from more than 4,000 interviews with U.S. adults, including 295 men under 30 and 145 women under 30. Wendy Swanson tells us local law enforcement in Arizona in Nancy Guthrie's neighborhood are now increasing their patrols.
The Pima County Sheriff's Office says that's due to residents' complaints of social media influencers on private property. Reports say Sheriff Chris Nanos attended a neighborhood watch meeting to discuss the move. The mother of Today's Show host Savannah Guthrie has been missing for over 2 months and is believed to have been abducted. No arrests have been made. In Arizona, I'm Wendy Swanson.
The Justice Department launching an investigation into sexual misconduct allegations against former California Congressman Eric Swalwell. That, according to multiple reports. At least 5 women have come forward with accusations. Earlier this week, a woman accused him of drugging and raping her. He has denied the allegations. A Democrat has suspended his campaign for California governor and stepped down from Congress. Meanwhile, lawyers for ex-Congressman Eric Swalwell have suggested that he could sue the women who are accusing him of sexual assault. Erica Vladimir is from Harassment-Free New York, and she says the threat of legal action reinforces a climate of intimidation.
That instills a lot of fear and almost confirms this, bad societal idea that women should stay silent.
Now, the former congressman denies rape accusations, but admits that he made what he calls mistakes in judgment, although not going into detail as what those mistakes in judgment were. Daniel Martindale tells us a California woman who fell while heavily intoxicated aboard a Carnival cruise ship is successfully suing the company.
A federal jury in Florida has found Carnival liable for injuries Diana Sanders suffered in January while aboard the ship Radiance. She was awarded $300,000 in damages. Sanders says she fell down a set of stairs and suffered severe injuries after being served 14 shots of tequila in less than 9 hours. The jury determined Carnival employees were negligent in over-serving her. I'm Daniel Martindale.
And the Artemis crew says it's bonded forever after its record-breaking mission around the moon. Mission Commander Reed Wiseman, speaking at the news conference yesterday, joined by his 3 crewmates.
We launched as friends, and we came back as best friends.
Specialist Christina Cook said she was not actually aware of how much attention the mission was getting back on Earth. She said her husband later told her the crew has made a difference, and she said that brought tears to her eyes, and making a difference was all the crew wanted. It was a beautiful press conference yesterday. You can still find it online if you want to take a look. We'll be talking about that coming up in the second hour, or actually in this hour of Catholic Connection on EWTN Radio Extra. Okay, so just a reminder, in our 2 cent segment, we're going to be having a longer clip from the astronauts on Artemis 2 and talking about the impact of what they experienced while in space and what that means in terms of the importance of reflection. And then we're going to be chatting with, for 2 segments, our good friend Michael New, who's a senior associate scholar for the Charlotte Lozier Institute. Shocker! Planned Parenthood showing an increase in abortions and a decrease in other healthcare actions. I'm shocked, I tell you, shocked that there's gambling in this establishment. We'll be right back. If you feel like you need a break and need just time to reflect and refresh, do so. If you're feeling it, that means it's needed. I just want to remind you before we get into our main topic for today on the importance of reflection, if you missed portion of our interview with John Hale, the president of Corporate Travel, earlier, and you want a really unique experience, every year we do the Grand Hotel Getaway on beautiful Mackinac Island at the gorgeous Grand Hotel, gorgeous and historic Grand Hotel. The theme is going to be this year all about our nation's freedom and the connection to religious freedom. Bishop Robert Barron, keynote speaker. We have Monsignor Shea from the University of Mary. We have my dear friend, and I call him my little brother, known as a dancing priest, another dynamic priest, Father Frankie Cicero, will be joining us. We have a special discount that we're offering for listeners of Catholic Connection. 866-468-1420 is the number. 866-468-1420 on top of the $100 discount that's being offered. They're offering for the first 10 callers $200 per person. So that's double what's being offered. If you mention Teresa and the Grand Hotel or Teresa Tomeo and Catholic Connection when you call in, 866-468-1420. And being on Mackinac Island, as John Hale mentioned, gives you a true sense of peace because there's no cars, there's very little noise except the clippity-clop of the horses who are pulling the carriages along for transportation there. And maybe a freighter that goes by and you hear the beautiful horn from the ship, or maybe the waves lapping against the shore of Mackinac Island. It's just so peaceful. And people go to places like this to rejuvenate and refresh because we need downtime. And I thought this was really interesting when watching the conversation with the reporters yesterday, that wonderful press conference that the astronauts from Artemis Crew conducted, answering all kinds of questions. And taking a moment from a reporter who was asking a deep question about what they experienced and what they saw while they were up there in space, circling the moon. And Reed Wiseman was the one who made the first comment, but others also weighed in. And they're saying they still, even though they've been back for several days, really haven't had a chance to comprehend what was before them. We're going to play this clip, and then I'll have some more comments on the other side. Here you go.
When Apollo 14 astronaut Edgar Mitchell was returning from the moon, he had an experience so profound that when he returned to Earth, he devoted the rest of his life to studying the nature of human consciousness. And it's a theme that all four of you touched on to varying degrees at some point during the mission. And so my question is, now that you've been back on Earth for just a few days and had a little bit of time to sit with it, do any of you feel as though you had an experience similar to what Mitchell described, this sense of universal connectedness? And did you experience somehow a shift in consciousness somehow? Thanks.
Yes. Chris, it's a great question. The only thing I can do is just share one quick story. When I got back on the ship, I'm not really a religious person, but there was just no other avenue for me to explain anything or to experience anything. So I asked for the chaplain on the Navy ship to just come visit us for a minute. And when that man walked in, I'd never met him before in my life, but I saw the cross on his collar, and I broke down in tears. It's very hard to fully grasp what we just went through. And in these short, you just said it's been a week since we've been back, but it's been a week of medical testing, physical testing, doctors, science objectives. We have not had that decompression. We have not had that reflection time. So I'm basing this on what we saw. And when the sun eclipsed behind the moon, I think all four of us, I turned to Victor and I said, I don't think humanity has evolved to the point of being able to comprehend what we were looking at right now, because it was otherworldly and it was amazing.
The only thing I would add is that beautiful thing. First of all, thank you for sharing that. That was a really special moment. I was in the bed right across when the chaplain came in, and the only thing I would add is I am a religious person, but everything else is the same. There is something in there, and as we start to process, I'll have to tell you next week, but haven't had a chance to really unpack it all yet.
Yeah, I mean, think about it, what they experienced. And these are men and women who are extremely intelligent and above normal in terms of intelligence. And what they accomplished was absolutely amazing. And they're still trying to comprehend. It will probably take months and even years, especially the visions that they encountered of very different angles of God's universe and the creation of the moon and the stars and being so close to everything. It can't even imagine. Colossians 3:2 says, set your affection on things above earth, not on things on the earth. And the scriptures, especially the Old Testament, filled, and even the New Testament, filled with verses on reflection and self-reflection. Proverbs 27:19. As in water, face answers to the face, so the heart of man to man. Let a man examine himself, 1 Corinthians 11:28 says, and so let him eat of that bread and drink of that cup. Psalm 119 through 105 reminds us, thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. So in other words, so you're thinking about God and you're thinking about his word and reflecting on it in your life. This idea of reflection, this idea of contemplation. And you wouldn't believe, maybe you would, how many arguments I get from people. And I am a travel coach for Italy. I have a website, travelitalyexpert.com. And the reason I started it is because I want people to have beautiful experiences in Italy. I want them to get the most out of it, most importantly, faith-wise. Because Deacon Dom and I are focusing a great deal on this in our ministry now as a deacon couple, because we understand from our own experience, personal experience, and the experience of what we've witnessed in terms of leading pilgrimage after pilgrimage for the past 25 years, on what beauty can do for a person. Only if they have time, however, to reflect on what they're witnessing, what they're seeing. As you heard, of course, the astronauts saying, we're not going to be able to do this in a few short days. This is going to take some time. And do you know that there's actually a syndrome that causes sometimes, some experts say, both physical and mental stress if you don't take time to reflect and if you take too much in. And so getting back to what I tell my clients when they sit there and say, okay, we want to go to Rome, we want to go to Florence, we want to go to Venice, we want to go to Assisi, and then we want to go to the Amalfi Coast, and we have 8 days. Well, first of all, please look at a map. It's not physically possible because you'll spend most of the time in the car and in line. And secondly, you won't remember a thing. How do I know that? Been there, done that, bought the t-shirt. But I do get a lot of arguments and pushback, and I tell people, look, I'm providing you a service. You can take my advice, that's up to you, or you can throw it out the window. And I've had so many people say, oh, we'll be fine, we're going to do this anyway, we like a fast-paced trip, but they don't understand what they're encountering and whom they're encountering when they go to a place like Italy or Poland or France or any of these places. There's just so many amazing sites, right? And there's something called, and Dr. Bunsen was on the show talking about our pilgrimage a few weeks ago that we're doing in October. And by the way, we still have room if you're interested. Something called the Stendhal syndrome. Okay, it's a syndrome, or Florence syndrome, it's often called, a psychosomatic condition involving rapid heartbeat, confusion, hallucinations, and even fainting, allegedly occurring when individuals become exposed to objects, artworks, or phenomena of great beauty. The affliction is named after the 19th century French author Stendhal. And so this is a real thing. Your mind will shut down. You can't take in that much unless, as the astronauts are saying, you take time, and this is what they're doing now, to comprehend, to reflect, to think about what you have seen and experienced. The glory of God is so immense in so many ways. Why do we rush it? And the glory of God, whether it's on Mackinac Island, whether it's in Rome, whether it's in Paris, whatever, can be seen anywhere and everywhere. And sometimes you just have to sit and say how great thou art. I don't know how you cannot believe in someone above us, above human beings, that this just didn't happen. Richard and I were talking about this before the show, and he said he had that experience and he went to the Rocky Mountains. How do you look at such beauty? I think some people actually may rush through things because they're afraid to stop and think, because if they recognize that there is a grand designer behind all of this, then they have to reckon themselves with that grand designer and change. You need time to reflect. You need time to ponder. And you need time to thank God for his creation. How great thou art indeed. We'll be right back. Happy Friday, as I like to say, Friday, April 17th, 2026, in the second week of Easter. Always great to catch up with our friend Michael New, Senior Associate Scholar of the Charlotte Lozier Institute and Assistant Professor of Practice for Catholic University of America. Michael, how are you? Great to catch up with you.
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
All righty then. So we are talking about new information from the Guttmacher Institute, known as the research arm of Planned Parenthood, for last year, showing that abortions continue to increase post-Dobbs, and Planned Parenthood in their 2025 report and other supposed health, activities are decreasing. So tell us what you know about this.
Well, with the Guttmacher report, they found that there were over 1,126,000 abortions in 2025. That's a very slight increase from 2024, about 0.2 of a percentage point. So one thing that I'm telling pro-life audiences is the reason why numbers are going up is telehealth abortions.
Yeah,
we worked hard to pass strong pro-life laws after Dobbs, but the fact of the matter, in these pro-life states, women can go online and obtain these chemical abortion pills through the mail, and that's really undercutting these pro-life laws. And the Trump administration could end this tomorrow, or even today, if they wanted to. I mean, telehealth abortions only started during the pandemic. It was intended to be temporary, but sadly, the Biden administration could see this unwise policy, and so did the Trump administration. So it's a source of great frustration to a lot of pro-lifers, including me.
Yeah, it is frustrating because in some ways this administration is so pro-life. In other ways, they seem to be sitting on things and not doing what needs to be done.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the Trump administration has done some good things. You know, the first budget that President Trump signed defunded Planned Parenthood. He did pardon the pro-life activists who were involved in some civil disobedience and got some very disproportionately heavy jail time due to the FACE Act. So, I mean, they do some good things. But on this issue with telehealth abortions, it's frustrating. Again, the FDA could easily change the old rules. They don't need Congress's permission, but they've just dragged their feet. They talk about a study they're doing, and we just don't know what the time frame is.
Why do you think they're dragging their feet on this? Is it because we're in a midterm election year?
I think that's exactly why. For whatever reason, I think President Trump's political team thinks putting limits on telehealth abortions is a political loser. You know, I think President Trump really wants Republicans to maintain control of the House and the Senate after 2026. I don't think he wants to be impeached again. And for whatever reason he thinks that limiting telehealth abortions is a political loser, the polling doesn't really bear that out. You know, people are concerned, as they should be, about unlimited access to chemical abortions. But his team thinks it might hurt him politically, and I think that's really driving a lot of his decisions.
Now, speaking of public policy, things that are not being done, but you point out in your article some things that are being done. Let me read a little bit from your piece. Gut marker data shows slight abortion increase in 2025, which was published in the National Review. You say the gut marker information adds to an impressive body of data stating that public policy decisions play a large role in state abortion rates. Florida started enforcing a heartbeat law in 2024. Not surprisingly, the number of abortions performed in the Sunshine State fell by more than 25% between 2023 and 2025. Iowa's experience was similar. Iowa also started enforcing a heartbeat law in 2024 and saw abortions fall more than 24% between 2023 and 2025. While Florida and Iowa, you say, have recently started to enforce protective pro-life laws, other states have made their abortion policies more permissive. So what you're saying here is that when you have these good laws in place, we see the results, right?
Right. I mean, states can still do a lot of good, even if those laws are weakened a bit by the telehealth abortions. States still can do a lot of good. You know, Florida passed a telehealth, Florida signed Governor DeSantis in Florida signed a Heartbeat Act that protects preborn children after 6 weeks gestation in 2024. Iowa also put in place a heartbeat law that also protects preborn children after 6 weeks gestation, and we see abortions fall in both states. Other states, sadly, have made their policies more permissive. Sadly, Missouri voters voted to put abortion in the state constitution in 2024. You see a big increase in abortions in 2025. You see other states like North Dakota, where their Life and Conception Act was struck down by a judge. You see a big abortion increase there. So states still have the ability to do a lot of good on this issue. I'm glad some states have, but we need to keep it up this current election cycle.
Talking with Michael New, Senior Associate Scholar, Charlotte Lozier Institute, and Assistant Professor of Practice at the Catholic University of America, about some new information from the Guttmacher Institute, considered the research arm of Planned Parenthood, for last year, showing abortions continue to increase post-Dobbs. Of course, taking a detailed look at that. And he also has an article, as you mentioned, on National Review, and we'll put a link up there in our information on my website if you want more details. So let's talk a little bit about what we can do in the pro-life movement. First, I want to go back. I want to take you back to Michigan, because my home state really was ground zero for all these different types of amendments. The one that you just mentioned, these extreme amendments, putting abortion rights in the constitutions. It started in Michigan, and you mentioned Missouri, but there's other states that are taking this up now, right?
Right. I mean, there's some possibilities for good. Missouri's going to have another ballot question, which is actually going to put some of the pro-life protections back in place. So Missouri voters get another chance. The initial polling looks pretty good. Obviously, we have a ways to go, but the first round of polling says that Missouri voters aren't so wild about abortion on demand. So we have actually a chance to win in Missouri. There's going to be a ballot question in Virginia, not far from where I live, that's going to put abortion in Virginia state constitution. Virginia's a tough state. It's been trending more and more blue. We're going to have to raise a lot of money. Probably we're going to work hard there, I'm sure. Idaho, looks like there's going to be a ballot question there to put abortion in their constitution. So we got our work cut out for us in 2026.
Yeah. And how do you see this going this year? What do you think in midterm elections? Any particular, in addition to those areas, any other areas you're watching closely?
Well, I mean, a lot's going to happen between now and November. The there's a lot of litigation right now about kind of gerrymandering and states trying to redraw districts the way they're favorable to one party or another. So it's really going to be kind of hard to say. I think that I'm optimistic pro-lifers can do well in Missouri. I think we can do well in Idaho. That's a pretty conservative state. Virginia's going to be tough. I hope we can pull out a win there, but that's going to be a heavier lift.
Again, talking with Michael New about his recent article on National Review regarding stats from the Guttmacher Institute, which is considered the research arm of Planned Parenthood regarding slight abortion increases in 2025. The president has mentioned time to time, especially recently, that he thinks abortion should be decided at the state level. Could this be another one of the reasons why we're not seeing any action on telehealth abortions?
That's also possible. I mean, after Dobbs, President Trump and a lot of Republicans made it pretty clear that they really didn't want to pass federal pro-life laws. I think that's a mistake. I think all levels of government have a responsibility to protect the preborn, but he seemed to kind of view abortion now as a state issue. And I think, there's a chance that's driving his thinking as well.
Do you think it's going to be revisited with the administration before the elections or no?
I think it's going to be after the election. I mean, the FDA, they say they are doing a study. They've been very scarce when it comes to details about the study, about the safety of telehealth abortions. But the study apparently is happening. It will trigger something. What it will trigger, I don't know. I think it will be revisited, but I think it's going to be after the midterm elections.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, we have another segment with Michael coming up. And again, if you'd like to search for the article online, the headline is New Guttmacher Data Showing a Slight Abortion Increase in 2025. When we come back, a couple of other stories we're going to visit, including a recent report that came out from the Justice Department. More proof that the government was hounding and following and harassing pro-lifers for years in some cases. Media didn't even cover it. Surprise. We'll be right back. Welcome back, Catholic Connection. Great to be with you. Great to have Michael New with us, of course, from National Review and Catholic University and the Lozier Institute, Charlotte Lozier Institute. All right, Michael, let's take a look at another big pro-life story that some of the conservative outlets covered. Of course, we covered it here, and a few of the conservative secular media outlets did cover it, but everybody else buried it. Shocker. This is a story from lifenews.com. Abortion advocacy groups routinely helped the Biden Department of Justice track pro-life activists, providing information that became the basis for indictments. The DOJ's National Task Force on Violence Against Reproductive Health Care Providers affirmatively asked the abortion groups about pro-life individuals' travel and constitutionally protected advocacy, according to a Tuesday report on the Biden administration's weaponization of the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances, or the FACE Act. Former Civil Rights Division trial attorney Sanjay Patel, who served as director of the task force, was on texting terms with the National Abortion Federation security team and regularly communicated with Planned Parenthood Federation of America and the Feminist Majority Foundation, according to this report. During the investigation of the later pardoned cases, the non-governmental organization sent DOJ security reports or dossiers on the activities of the pro-life activists and their personal information. For example, in 2021, before an annual conference by a pro-life group, one pro-choice NGO sent the task force director and the FBI a 137-page memorandum on the conference schedule, lodging, and multi-page dossiers on numerous, quote, anti-choice individuals, including many of the pardoned defendants. So, Michael, I think what's key here is this report shows just how bad it was in previous administrations, and particularly this one was under the Biden administration, who was a Catholic president, called himself a proud member of the Catholic Church. And it's excessive here in terms of how they went out of their way to ignore other major issues that needed to be addressed and yet went after pro-lifers. What are your thoughts after hearing this story, first of all?
It was really disappointing. I mean, it was not surprising, but it was certainly disappointing. I mean, the Biden DOJ really made it a priority to prosecute and harass pro-life people. I mean, one thing about the FACE Act is that, it's supposed to, quote-unquote, protect abortion facilities, but also protect pro-life groups, churches, pregnancy centers. There was a lot of violence directed toward pro-life groups after Dobbs, and the Biden administration did next to nothing. There was vandalism, there were threats, Local law enforcement sometimes did certain things, but the Biden DOJ did next to nothing. But they were willing to go back and spend a lot of time prosecuting pro-lifers who engaged in civil disobedience. They really requested excessive amounts of jail time for them. It really shows what happens being a very politicized DOJ, and I'm really glad this report, has been brought to light.
Well, think of the Houck family, the man, the pro-life counselor, sidewalk counselor, who was arrested, and they had all these agents coming in, storming his home early morning, scaring the family. Now, all the charges against him were dropped. He was vindicated, and he actually won a lawsuit. He won $1 million+ But think of what the turmoil and the hell that family went through.
And it was just ridiculous. I mean, basically, Mark Houck, the most negative interpretation of that interaction, he shoved somebody. And maybe he should shove, a pro-life clinic escort. But you don't send, federal law enforcement to prosecute two guys who get into a shoving match. I mean, local law enforcement looked into it, shrugged and said, whatever. You had a dispute. No one got hurt. Everyone just goes home. But the fact of the matter, they, didn't let him surrender himself. They showed up at his house, in the wee hours of the morning, scared his wife, scared his kids. And that's just ridiculous. I mean, there's no reason they had to do that. And I'm glad that Mark Houck got that very generous settlement, and I think he certainly deserves it.
They do these kinds of things for intimidation, correct?
Oh, absolutely. I think they really do go after, somewhat visible people in the pro-life movement. Mark Houck does have a strong Christian men's ministry called the King's Men. There's others in the report. I mean, my friends, Lauren Handy, who is a very prominent sidewalk counselor here in the Washington, D.C. area. They went after her. They infiltrated pro-life groups. They would send informants to meetings to try to glean information. So, they do go after high-profile people as a means of intimidation.
Well, I want to get into some detail and get your reaction. By the way, we were talking during the break. You can find this on the homepage of the Department of Justice, justice.gov, and it's worth taking a look at if you can handle it, because it got my blood pressure up and I had to walk away from it for a little bit. The Biden Department of Justice closely collaborating with pro-abortion groups to track pro-life activists' First Amendment activity. Pro-abortion groups, especially the National Abortion Federation, Planned Parenthood, and Feminist Majority Foundation, capitalized on their relationship with the Biden DOJ to gain internal information and push targets for enforcement. The groups compiled evidence and dossiers, and we mentioned this earlier, that ultimately gave rise to search warrants and charges. The Biden DOJ's prosecutor engaged in inappropriate conduct and comments. Prosecutors knowingly withheld evidence that defense counsel requested. How can they do that to prepare an affirmative defense? Isn't that called disclosure? I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but tried to screen out jurors based on religion and authorized aggressive arrest tactics instead of allowing pro-life defendants to self-surrender. Your thoughts?
Right. I mean, those trials that occurred to the FACE Act were ridiculous. I mean, the jury was very biased, I can think of several things. First off, some of the jurors were like monthly donors to Planned Parenthood. We're not talking about somebody who made it one donation one time. These are monthly donors. That's not a fair jury. Also, I mean, the pro-life lawyers wanted to talk about abortion facility misconduct to try to put the pro-lifers in a more favorable light. That evidence, that information, they couldn't disclose. So, there were the trials were completely not fair to pro-lifers. There's a lot of information they wanted to present about misconduct in abortion facilities. They couldn't present. The jury was very biased. It was a bad situation. I am glad that President Trump did go ahead, did the right thing, and pardon these people.
It was a circus. It really was. Okay, here's more, but wait, there's more. The Biden DOJ helped a pro-abortion group secure funding. The lead prosecutor on each FACE Act prosecution served as a reference on the National Abortion Federation's application for a private grant. They found no record of ethics approval for the attorney to take an interest in the financial outcome to a party having business before the Biden DOJ. The Biden DOJ pursuing significantly harsher sentences for pro-life defendants and violent pro-abortion defendants. The Biden DOJ requesting an average sentence of 26.8 months for pro-life defendants compared to 12 months for pro-abortion defendants. I mean, they were just blatant with this, Michael.
Yep, I agree. I mean, they really had no shame. There was collaboration. There was conflict of interest. Again, I'm very glad that it's very rare. Usually DOJs don't report on their predecessors, but I'm glad the Trump administration did this. Again, they have a report. It's right on the Trump DOJ website. It's hard to miss. I'd recommend that any of your readers, or any of your listeners, I should say, take time and spend some time reading it. The corruption, the conflict of interest, is stunning. And again, I'm glad we're giving this some attention.
Talking with Michael New from the Charlotte Lozier Institute, Catholic University, and National Review about some top pro-life stories in the last week or so. Another story, switching gears, another story you wanted to discuss was a story regarding more young men interested in religion and saying it's important. Let me pull that story up. It was on EWTNnews.com this morning. I actually ran it in my news, but it's a very important story, I think. So we'll take a look at that. Hold on one second. I'm going to pull it up and read it for you. Really, I think an important story. But you know what? Before I find the story, go ahead, and I want to get your reaction because it was surprising for many of us, because many of us are thinking that, oh, it's going to be the women that are going to show this higher interest. What were your thoughts when you saw the story?
Well, it's kind of interesting that if you look at a history of polling data across time, across different age demographics, women are almost always more religious than men in terms of church attendance, in terms of how often they pray, in terms of whether or not they identify with a certain faith tradition. But this new Gallup poll shows something different. They find, at least among young people aged 18 to 29, men are a lot more religious than women are. You saw a big spike in the percentage of men who say that religion is very important to their life. That over a 2-year time span, there's a 14 percentage point increase in the number of young men who said religion was very important to them. So you really see a real surge of interest in religion among young men. Young men are also more likely than young women to attend a church service at least monthly. They're more likely to identify with a certain faith tradition. So I think this is a very interesting finding. I think that those of us on college campuses do notice this. That we do see a lot of Christian ministries, a lot of Catholic ministries are attracting a lot of men. I think that's a positive development. I'm glad that men are finding a home in Christianity and Catholicism. We have to work maybe on getting more women to attend, but the fact that men are interested is a good development.
You made a great point. You're on a college campus. So in addition to what you just mentioned, what else are you seeing with young men and faith these days, Michael?
I just think that, one thing that's been a positive development is, Knights of Columbus has started college chapters. We didn't have this in the 90s when I was a student, but man, the college chapters are doing very good and serving the Catholic Church on their respective campuses. That's a good thing. That's attracted a lot of men. That's given men a lot of good leadership opportunities. I think that just Christian and Catholic groups are one place where men don't feel marginalized. They're encouraged to seek out leadership roles. They can kind of push back against particular liberalism. They're not being bombarded by transgender ideology all day long. So it doesn't surprise me that men are interested in Christianity. I think it's going to be a refuge for them, a place where they can kind of take a break from, I think, the secularism of a lot of campus life.
Do you think this ties in with the recent reports of all the converts we've had in Catholicism, especially this past year?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that I don't have gender breakdown on the new Catholic converts, but I think that there's a lot more interest in faith and a lot more interest in religion. I think a lot of young people had their life disturbed by the pandemic. I think they want authenticity. They want community. The Catholic Church does provide that. I think we had over 1,800 Catholic converts in the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C. alone. I saw big numbers elsewhere. I've seen good numbers coming out of Newman centers. I also think the Catholic Church has made a better investment in young adult programming. For a long time, people after college got married. That's not always the case anymore. People sometimes stay single for a while. The Catholic Church is realizing that, has more options and more opportunities for young men, young women to get together, learn about the faith, socialize. I think that's a positive development. So a lot of good things are happening.
I think it's really positive because if you think about the teachings of the church, we're not going to change, right? Abortion is still intrinsically evil. Birth control is still intrinsically evil, always will be. Marriage is between a man and a woman. There are certain things you have to believe as a Catholic, and yet people are still coming in, Michael, in droves, literally.
Yeah, well, I think people want that authenticity. They want that consistency. They want that structure. I think that's a feature. It's certainly not a bug. So I think that, people really do want, authenticity. They want clear teachings. Frankly, anecdotally, the churches I see that are frankly, more conservative and talk about sanctity of life issues and talk about family, they're the ones that are really doing well in terms of attracting a lot of converts. So I think that's an exciting time. God is on the move, and I think that we're going to see a lot of good things in the future.
All right. So, Michael New, what's coming up with you? What's the next article? What's in the near future? What can we expect?
Well, I mean, we got a lot going on. I'm actually right now in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, We have the first ever pro-life march in Pittsburgh tomorrow. If you're in the Pittsburgh area, please join us. It's at 10 a.m. in Shenley Park. I'm from Pittsburgh originally, so excited to get a chance to take part in that. So that's exciting. Gallup is going to have some polling coming out on abortion sometime in either late May, early June. They do a poll every year that's usually pretty high quality, gives us some insight what people are thinking. I'll be sure to write about that. And later in the fall, we have the 50th anniversary of the Hyde Amendment. We'll have our big pro-life victories. It's turning 50. We've done a good job keeping federal taxpayer dollars away from funding elective abortions. So I'll have a lot to say about that.
Okay, so this is the first pro-life march in Pittsburgh?
First ever pro-life march in Pittsburgh.
Wow.
We've had marches in Harrisburg, and there have been things in Philadelphia, but as far as we know, this is the first pro-life march in Pittsburgh.
Well, I bet you there's going to be a lot of folks from Steubenville there, because Steubenville, Ohio, and Pittsburgh are very close. So that should be a great turnout. Michael, thank you so much. Great discussion on a number of issues, including a recent article of Michael's in the Catholic or in the publication National Review. Michael is a senior associate scholar for the Charlotte Lozier Institute and also with Catholic University. We'll be right back. Wishing you a blessed and a peaceful and a reflective weekend. Take time, take some downtime for yourself. Just a reminder, just had an email from Corporate Travel. Several rooms already booked under the big discount they're offering. So I just want to remind you, the Grand Hotel Getaway coming up in August, early August in northern Lower Michigan's Mackinac Island at the Grand Hotel. If you call now, run to the phones, 866-468-1420, and let them know you heard us discuss it here on Catholic Connection with yours truly, Teresa Tomio. $200 off per person. That's a nice chunk of change. It's going to be a great week. Actually, 3 days, is it? 9th through the 11th. Bishop Barron, Father Frankie Cicero, Monsignor Shea from University of Mary, Mass every day, talks, time on the island. You can't beat it. Again, 866-468-1420. If you call today, mention this show and the Grand Hotel, you get $200 off per person. Pray for me as I'm heading to Windsor, Colorado to conduct an entire retreat for almost 300 women that takes place tomorrow, doing 3 talks, and I'm it. The poor ladies. Oh, well. Looking forward to it, though. I love speaking about the Lord and the faith and all that he's doing in the church, as you just heard from Michael New. That will be all day tomorrow at Our Lady of the Valley in Windsor, Ontario. Beautiful parish there. They have an annual women's retreat. All right, what's coming up Monday? We have another great show lined up for you, so please tune in to both hours. Of course, the one, the only Matt Swain will be joining us from the Journey Home. And then we'll also be touching base with Adriana Gonzalez on an upcoming docudrama, That They May Be One. And then the one, the only, Gail Buckley-Behringer with our scripture verse of the week, always getting us started very nicely with the Bible. Basic instructions before leaving Earth. Have a great weekend, and next week we'll talk to you on a Monday, God willing. Ciao, ciao.